Okay, this KOINE session, KOINE, just like the word coin, means common. This is the kind of language of the Greek New Testament, or the New Testament. Don't know why, but sometimes someone can take a Bible class and someone says, "Oh, you were studying the Bible," and then if we're studying a Greek class, they say we're studying Greek. So I ask why, if they're studying English, it's called the Bible, and if we're studying the New Testament in Greek, it's called Greek. But if you're studying Greek, that is the New Testament, you're studying the New Testament. So this one involves purpose. How do we establish purpose? And there's part of speech, hina, sometimes called a hina clause. It's just that little thing there is a rough breather, just an H sound. That'd be I, N, A. So that would just be a little hina clause. But it usually introduces purpose. That is, that conjunction does a lot of times. So for example, in John 20:31, John 20:31, we found these things were written in order that, and then one of them was in order that you all, it's plural, you all might believe. It's aorist, which is the simplest form here in this idea of punctular action. You all might believe. And of course, and also in order that, and then it's ones who are believing. It's continually. I just don't have room, but it's then the idea of the ones who are believing might have life through his name. That is, you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So that governs, as I was saying before, the whole book of John. And to show you how important that is, remind you of John 3:16. And it says that in this manner or so, and it shows how God loves the world, gives his Son. At the time Jesus was speaking for us, of course, he's given his Son. His Son has, it's past tense to us, but it's still an event. At the time Jesus was speaking, he gives his Son so that, well, in this manner God loved the world, so that he gave his only begotten Son, in order that, that little word there appears, in order that. And of course that's about everyone who is believing, who is believing continuously. And I've demonstrated, especially for our young folks at church, they're the ones still in school and taking calculus and physics and using large calculators, and so they don't have a problem thinking along with common language. Well, you'll see a lot of discussion about the world and God so loved the world, and then there's another dichotomy there, and someone says, well, is that everyone? Or, well, this is God's way of loving the world, is to make a provision for everyone who is believing. And we know that everyone who is believing has received the gospel, that is, from the Old Testament, the coming of Jesus. They've heard that message, they believe, they've been born again, now they are believing. And what happens is, if you divorce John 3:16 from the purpose of the book of John, which is in order that people might believe, and that believing they might have life, then you can isolate that text. Let's just say John 3:16. Let's say you box it in and you now broken it and detached it from the purpose of John 20:31, you can create quite a tension there, because some folks will say John 3:16 refers to everyone, but everyone's not believing. And then they'll say, but the world refers to everyone. But in the book of John, it says Jesus laid down his life for his sheep. And then again, you can box that in and break it apart from this purpose here, and then you can cause all kinds of tension, as you'll see people. I think they might be serious, but they could be pretending. But how would you know the difference? The energy behind hypocrisy or pretense is a lot like the energy behind ignorance. It can certainly be sustained longer than you think. But God's showing his love by being a good shepherd, his son being a good shepherd, as opposed to the hireling, the religious leaders of that day, much like the ones we have to contend with, who just constantly break these things apart and don't keep it in the context. Well, then what do we know now just by paying attention to this purpose, by that small little conjunction, hina, I-N-A, with a little rough breather, give you an H sound. I mean, it seems a very small thing, but it's huge when you realize then that this is the way, when God showed his love for his people, he showed his love for his people in the presence of everyone. So yes, you can say God so loved the world by making a provision for everyone in it that is believing. And that's the way he accomplished this purpose, which was in order that people who had not yet believed would believe. So Jesus laying down his life for his sheep was not written with a purpose to argue, that is, dichotomize, did he die for anyone else or did he only die for the sheep, which seems to keep people busy. And that's, well, you said, but what is that? Well, that's another purpose. That's another purpose. And it's not in the KOINE apologetics. That is, it's not in the KOINE apology, and it's not in the KOINE text. The purpose of the story of Jesus laying down his life for the sheep, he being the uniquely qualified shepherd, the good shepherd, for God so loving the world that he gave his only begotten Son, making a provision for everyone who is believing. All of that is driven toward this purpose here, and was written in order that you might believe. The text about people who were believing, yet they weren't abiding in his word, showing that there was such a thing as people believing, and it's even perfect tense. They had believed, they were still believing, but it was independent of his word, which that's very popular today. You can read 1 John. There's people who, even today, suppose that they can say that they are, they know him, but they're not keeping his commandments. Or as the book of James, that is Jacob, actually is what the word is in KOINE. It says someone might say what they believe. But again, this purpose shows that the argument about to whom does the world refer, that's a bad argument, because when it's contextualized, as my hermeneutics teacher, who was a very common, adhered to the common text, would tell you, without the context, which the purpose, according to the context of the whole book, comes to the end of it, telling us why these things are written. So, yes, God did demonstrate his love for the world, made a provision for everyone who is believing. And yes, those were people who had already heard and had believed punctular, and then had been born again, and then were believing continuously. And yes, that's how he brought that gospel. The good news was to show that someone did die for his people, which would be the only thing to move you to want to be part of that. If you say, well, it's a beautiful story, as one atheist said, and he said it's too good to be true. Well, he's close. It's too good, but not too good to be true. It's true. That's what makes it good. But he was moved by the demonstration. So we see Jesus doing something in contrast to hirelings as religion. We see God doing something in contrast to the picture of tyrannical gods or superstitious deities or malevolent spirits who go about terrorizing or antagonizing, harassing man. We see him giving his life in place of. So a little purpose clause would solve all of that by it identifies the true purpose. And the true purpose prevents you from having to create one. So when you hear someone arguing about, well, Jesus, the book says that Jesus died for the sins of his, or for his, he died for the sins of his people. The good shepherd laid down his life for his sheep. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, in order that everyone who is believing, all of that is to show that Jesus, that God sent his Son, that his Son did all of these things and totally conveyed to us a love powerful enough and unique enough that it would bring us to faith. And that was the purpose of it. And at the end of the book, it didn't say in order that the sheep might believe, punctular. The sheep already believed, punctular. The sheep were the ones who had been born again and are now believing continuously. It didn't say in order that only the, as some people mistake, only the predestined might believe, or only that the elect might believe, and all the other things that people can argue when you ignore the KOINE. There's a lot of heartache and disappointment when you ignore KOINE. The KOINE's already spelled out even the kind of action, so that not only do we have great definitions, functioning words that we can clearly know specifically, but we have a very distinct emphasis of kinds of action. So that's enough on that as far as a purpose clause and how that conjunction works to introduce it.